Derinkuyu, the underground city that housed 20,000 people. Close your eyes now. Let the world above grow quiet. Feel your shoulders loosen, your breath deepen. You're safe here. Wherever you are, maybe wrapped in a blanket, lying in bed, or resting in a quiet corner. Let this moment hold you. If you're listening right now, I'd love to know. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments. Because even though we're far apart, this story will weave us together across cities and time zones, across centuries and civilizations. Breathe slowly. Let your mind drift. Imagine a place where the ground beneath you is not solid, but hollow, vast, alive with hidden chambers. Imagine the stone under your feet whispering with the weight of ancient footsteps. Even now the stones hum in the silence of the night. You cannot tell if it's the wind or something older, something that remembers. The air down here is cooler, softer, as if it has never known sunlight. Your hand brushes a wall, rough, carved long ago, and the chill seeps into your skin. It's not the cold of emptiness, but the cold of something waiting. Above you, the surface world sleeps in houses and streets and fields. Down here, the earth itself has been shaped into a city, one that has been breathing quietly in the dark for centuries, maybe longer. You take a step, and your footfall is swallowed by the silence. The walls seem to close in, not to trap you, but to protect you, like the earth has wrapped itself around those who once called this place home. Your fingertips trace the grooves in the stone. They're too precise to be accidents. Every angle, every curve was chosen. It's a kind of architecture that speaks not of vanity or display, but of survival. This place, Derinkuyu, was not built to be seen. It was built to be hidden. Somewhere far below, deeper than you can yet imagine, there are wells and kitchens, stables and schools, all carved into the bedrock. But here, at the edge, you can only sense the scale. You're at the threshold of a mystery. Take another breath. Feel your body sink a little deeper into wherever you rest now. Let your thoughts slow. Above ground, the night might carry the sound of a passing car, a branch brushing against a window. But in your mind's ear, hear only the faint drip of water on stone. Picture the first step down into this underground world. Narrow, steep, curving away into shadow. The air grows cooler, drier, but never stale. Somewhere, far ahead, there's a soft flicker of light. Not bright, just enough to show the path. You keep moving, the surface forgotten behind you. Your breath echoes faintly. That sound, you realize, would have been all too familiar to the people who once lived here. Entire families, children playing in the dim light, elders seated in quiet conversation, voices softened by the stone around them. Imagine the smell of bread baking in a stone oven, the faint scent of hay from the livestock pens, the low murmur of daily life unfolding beneath the earth. But you cannot shake the thought, why here? Why would tens of thousands choose to live in the shadows, far from the open sky? Was it fear? Was it necessity? Or was it something else? Something we no longer understand? You rest your hand on a massive round stone door, perfectly fitted to block the passage. It could be rolled into place to seal off entire sections of the city. Each one weighs as much as a small car, yet they were shaped, moved, and set into the walls by people with tools far simpler than our own. They built these doors to turn the city into a fortress, to hold back danger, whether it came from human invaders or something else. Now, close your eyes and walk in your mind's memory of the place you've never been. You move past the door, deeper still. You pass narrow rooms where people once slept, alcoves where oil lamps once burned. Above you, shafts cut into the rock draw in fresh air from the surface, a breath from a world you cannot see. Even here, 20 stories below, the air is clean, crisp. The design is flawless. But as you move further in, you begin to feel something shift. It is not fear, not quite. It's the quiet recognition that you are in the presence of something that will outlast you, outlast all of us. These walls have seen generations come and go, entire histories rise and fall. Wars have raged above, kingdoms have been erased, and still the silence below has remained untouched. Rest here. Let that thought cradle you. The earth is steady beneath you, the dark is gentle, the stone around you is older than memory. In this moment, time doesn't matter. You're here now, and you could have been here 1,000 years ago. The deeper you go, the harder it is to tell the difference between then and now. Perhaps that is the true magic of this place. It erases the line between the living and the long gone. The shadows here hold more than absence. They hold stories. They hold the traces of footsteps worn into the floors, fingerprints smoothed into the walls. They hold the dreams and fears of people who lived entire lives without the sun. Take one more deep breath. Let your shoulders soften. You are safe. The city will keep its secrets for now. But as you listen to the silence, as you drift towards sleep, you may begin to hear its voice, low, patient, endless. And so, our journey begins. The passage narrows until your shoulders almost brush the stone, and the floor dips gently, leading you deeper with a patient curve that feels like a slow inhale. There's a soft draft on your face, a hidden breath that rises through the shaft somewhere above, and you follow it as if it were a thread. The light you carry is small and steady, only enough to show the walls grain and the tiny fractures where tools once bit and scraped. The rock is tough, volcanic and forgiving, yet the hands that shaped it were careful. Each edge is softened, each corner rounded, as though the builders already knew this. Place must never feel sharp. You touch the wall and feel not only the chill, but the faintest vibration of your own heartbeat, an echo made visible in stone. Your body loosens, your breath lengthens. You are drifting into the rhythm of the underground, a slow, even pulse, calm and luminous. The corridor opens with barely a notice, the way a hush opens into a song. A chamber blooms in the dark, low ceiling, wide floor, a shallow bowl for gathering. The air smells like cool clay and something older, a sweetness that might be dust or old grain, the memory of storage jars stacked and sealed. You pause, and in the pause you hear it, the soft tap of a droplet meeting stone, then vanishing into the great hush. The sound is not lonely. It is part of a pattern you have not yet learned. Your shoulders drop another whisper lower. You are safe. The dark is not a threat here. It is a blanket drawn over a sleeping city. On the right, a narrow mouth leads to a room with a raised lip where animals once stood. You can almost hear the warm breath of goats or small horses, the faint shift of hooves on packed earth. The wall bears a smooth groove, worn by rope or repeated touch, a quiet testimony that life here was not a rumour but a daily, ordinary thing. A stone manger rests against the curve, carved from the same earth that holds the ceiling. You think of hands, so many hands, steady and patient, turning void into shelter. Somewhere in the left-hand dark, another passage promises kitchens, soot and bread that once perfumed the air, bread broken in silence, bread that said, "We are still here." There is a round door a little farther on, not closed but leaning in its cradle like the moon caught in a window. Its rim is precise, its centre pierced for a lever that is long gone. You imagine the heft of it rolling into place in a single heavy breath, a barrier between danger and the small breathing world behind it. The thought is not frightening. It tells you that the people who built this place understood fear and answered it with design. The stone, the shadow, the silence. Each becomes a tool. The door does not speak of siege so much as of intention. It says that life here chose to continue, even when the sky was uncertain. You move on, and the tunnel bends again. Under your palm, the wall becomes subtly different, a change in the toolmark's direction, the angle of the cut. You picture the work passing from one generation to the next, each adding a corridor, a storage alcove, a place for lamps to nest in the stone like small suns. You picture the youngest apprentice learning the sound that tells you the wall is thin enough, the way the dust changes smell as you approach a void. And in that drifting image you feel a line between now and then blur. You're walking in their shadow, and their shadow is walking in you. A shaft rises above you like a black well into the sky. You tilt your head and feel a cool thread of air on your face. Somewhere far beyond the reach of your light, night presses its cheek to the earth and sends down its breath. The shaft is narrow and straight, yet the draft is steady. It is as if the builders had carved a throat for the city to sing through. You stand beneath it and listen for the faint murmur of the world above, wind over stone, grass bending, perhaps a far-off footstep you cannot tell. But you know the shaft has always known both realms, the buried and the open, the hidden and the revealed. In another chamber, you find the trace of a niche, soot-polished and hollowed to cradle flame. You picture an oil lamp burning low, its light catching on eyes that look past the flame into the weave of shadow. There, a figure seated against the wall, hands folded around a clay cup. There, two children counting their steps from one doorway to another. There, a woman pinching dough, turning it with a gesture that has no beginning and no end. And as you picture them, their outlines quiet and sure, you notice how your own breathing has fallen into time with theirs. The story is already carrying you, and you are lighter in your body, cradled, unhurried. The walls hold whispers of faint carvings, not grand reliefs, but marks, lines that might be tally or prayer, or simple decoration to make the dark feel friendly. You run your fingers a hair's breadth above them, not touching, just sensing the presence of intention. It is not hard to imagine that some carvings were meant to be read by fingertips alone, the way a blind traveller reads a path by the wind on their face. Down here, sight is a guest, touch is the host. The floor slopes again, and the air cools further, never biting, always kind. Your mind drifts to the people moving through these spaces, their days arranged like the rings of a tree. Work, rest, food, story, silence. Perhaps once the surface roared with danger, perhaps once it was simply uncertain. Either way, the city below learned to be enough. It learned to be a world that did not ask for the sun every day. There were wells to draw from, channels for water to pass, vents to carry smoke, hidden edges to spill heat. The engineering hides itself behind calm surfaces, but you can feel it. The way the air flows from behind you, the way sound travels and then disappears, the way moisture is kept away from seed and grain. All of it designed not for display but for tenderness toward life. You pause where the passage forks. To the left, a narrower throat drops into deeper shadow. To the right, the ceiling rises a little, and the floor is worn smoother by many feet. You choose the right, and the space opens into a room shaped like a held breath. It feels almost like a gathering hall, though small, just enough for a circle of listeners to cluster around a voice. Stand here a moment and listen to the silence until it becomes its own kind of speech. In the breath between sounds, you almost think you hear the soft rise of an old hymn or a household song hummed to keep rhythm with work. The tone is low, intimate, unafraid. You lean your back against the wall and let your eyes close. Sleep drifts close and friendly, as if it has been waiting for you at this bend all along. Your limbs grow heavy in the best way, warm and anchored. The story does not push. It settles around you like a cloak. There is no hurry. Down here the hours stretch and soften, and you sense that the city's first lesson is patience. The second is care. The third is trust that the stone remembers how to hold you. When you open your eyes again, the light shows a small alcove at knee height. Inside, a scatter of old impressions, perhaps jars once sat there. Perhaps tools rested there between tasks. You think of the day's rhythm in such a place. The first meal in the cool, the work of repair and shaping, the tending of animals, the teaching of children to walk these corridors by feel. You see hands washing in a basin, water poured from a jar, the glint of a bronze blade stored carefully out of reach, and you see the faces at evening, lit by 3 or 4 small flames, listening. The question returns, soft as a tide. What drew them under? Was it a single danger that called them down, or a chain of seasons that taught them to prefer the earth's embrace? Records offer one set of answers, ruins offer another. You're not ready to choose. For now, it is enough to stand in the threshold between asking and knowing, and to feel how the asking itself slows the heart, smooths the brow, invites rest. You step back into the corridor and let your fingers trail the wall all the way to the next bend, as if you are reading a book in a language you almost remember. The corridor lowers, your breath follows. A sense of arrival gathers ahead, like coming upon a clearing in a forest at night. Whatever waits will not startle you. This city is not a collection of empty rooms. It is an intention, a vow carved into earth, that life continues quietly, even when no one is there to witness it. The thought is a blanket on your shoulders. Let it settle. Let your eyelids grow heavy. The wind over stone, the echo of footsteps, the whisper of carved lines under your hand. These are your lullabies now. Before you move on, look back once. The upper passage is a dim curve, already fading into shadow. You realize that the underground has a way of gently erasing the surface from memory, not out of malice, but out of mercy. The mind loosens its hold on noise and glare. What remains is the slow beat of the hidden world. You exhale, long and steady. The path ahead will tell its story in time. For now you are within the earth, and the earth holds you, and everything is quiet. The light fades behind you until it is no more than a pale memory, and the darkness ahead feels softer, like cloth brushing against your thoughts. The tunnel curves again, not sharply, but in a long, deliberate arc, as though it wants to keep its secrets from those who do not commit to the journey. You take each step slowly, feeling the floor's texture beneath your feet. The surface is uneven, worn smooth in places by countless soles, then rising in small ridges where tools once carved. The rock seems alive with the memory of movement. Here, you're not just walking forward, you're walking deeper into time. Breathe slowly, feel your shoulders release. The air down here is different, cool but never biting, dry yet carrying the faintest hint of mineral sweetness. Every inhale feels like it has travelled centuries to reach you. There is no rush, no need for urgency. The underground knows patience. It has waited long enough for you. You can match its pace now, heartbeat steady, footsteps measured. Ahead, the space widens into a room shaped almost like a drop of water. The narrow throat of the corridor opens into a bulbous chamber, where the ceiling curves high enough that your light struggles to find it. You stand still in the centre, listening. The sound of your own breath comes back to you from all sides, softened into a whisper, like the city itself is breathing with you. You can imagine this place filled with quiet conversation, the scrape of bowls, the clink of a jug being set down on the stone floor. Perhaps it was a dining space. Perhaps it was something else entirely, a place for gathering, for planning, for stories told in hushed tones. You move toward one wall and notice a series of small openings cut low to the ground. They're too small for people, yet too carefully shaped to be random. You picture them filled with stored grain, baskets, jars sealed with wax or clay, food kept safe from the damp. The thought is comforting. Even in the deep earth, the people here had enough to share, enough to sustain each other. You imagine hands reaching into these openings, pulling out what was needed for the day, the way someone today might reach for a cupboard in a warm kitchen. Survival here was not just about hiding, it was about living. The tunnel beyond this chamber is narrow again, the ceiling lower so that you feel the stone just above your head. Your light brushes across marks in the wall-deep cuts, angled grooves that catch the shadow in different ways. They could be tool marks left during construction, or perhaps they are intentional symbols, a kind of language without letters. You run your fingers close, not touching, just tracing the shape in the air. Down here, meaning is not always given to you. Sometimes it is felt instead of read. Further along you pass a shaft that descends straight into darkness. You cannot see the bottom, but the air rising from it is cooler still, like a breath from a cavern far below. The people who built this place would have known every shaft, every turn, every hollow. They could move through it blind, guided by the feel of the walls and the change in air alone. To them this was not a maze, it was home. You step into another room, smaller than the last, but with an oddly reverent feel. The floor is smoother here, the walls straighter, almost as if the space was meant for more than practical use. You imagine a small group gathered, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in council, their faces lit from below by the glow of oil lamps. The light would dance on the stone, shifting the shadows until they seemed to breathe. Words spoken here would not vanish. They would fold themselves into the walls where they still rest even now. The silence feels thicker in this room, as though it has been holding something for a long time. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it wrap around you. The stillness is not empty. It is full of everything that has been said and done here, pressed into the air like scent into fabric. You feel your own breathing slow even more, as though matching the pulse of the place itself. When you leave the room, the passage curves upward slightly, and the air changes again, warmer, heavier. You find yourself in a section where the walls are streaked with faint discoloration, perhaps from centuries of smoke. This could have been a cooking area. You picture flat stones laid across small fires, the aroma of meals spreading into the corridors, drawing people in from their work. The smell of baking bread, of stew simmering in clay pots, of herbs gathered from above and dried in the cool air. These scents would have been the heartbeat of daily life here. Beyond, the tunnel drops once more, turning sharply. The darkness ahead seems deeper, not from lack of light, but from a feeling like you're stepping into a place that remembers something important. The floor levels out, and you enter a chamber unlike the others. It is taller, broader, with a central column of untouched stone left to support the ceiling. Around the column, shallow niches are carved, evenly spaced, each just large enough for a person to sit. You can almost see them there, figures at rest, their voices low, speaking into the stone as though it could carry their words forward in time. Perhaps it has. You circle the column slowly, fingertips grazing the smoothness where countless hands have touched. Some marks feel deliberate lines etched at chest height, worn so faint they are almost gone. They could have been decoration, or perhaps a way of marking the passage of seasons, the number of days spent underground, or the phases of the moon unseen above. You can't be sure, and that uncertainty feels right. The city does not give away its stories all at once. Leaving the column chamber, you notice how the air flows here, always a faint, steady current, even this far down. The builders had carved not only rooms and tunnels, but a living system, a way to keep breath moving through the city. Without it, this place would have suffocated. With it, it could sustain thousands. That knowledge, passed from hand to hand, was survival itself. As you continue, the walls close in again, the ceiling lowering until you must stoop. The stone presses close, but not oppressively. It feels more like a narrow hallway in an old house, guiding you towards something. Your light catches on the curve of another massive rolling stone door, this one still firmly in its slot. You stand before it, imagining the deep, grating sound it would make if moved, the way it would seal the passage entirely. Behind it, perhaps more rooms, more stories, more of the city untouched for centuries. You rest your palm against its surface and feel only stillness. You move past it, into another series of chambers, smaller, simpler, perhaps used for sleeping. The floors are flat, the walls plain, the ceilings low enough to hold warmth. You picture bedding laid out in rows, the soft sound of breathing filling the space at night. In the dark, with only the quiet company of one another, people here must have learned to listen differently, to hear the shift of a sleeper, the faint rustle of fabric, the way air changes when someone wakes. It is an intimacy most of us have forgotten, replaced by the distance of doors and separate rooms. Somewhere ahead, you sense the city turning inward again, drawing you deeper into its quiet heart. Each step takes you further from the memory of daylight, yet you do not miss it. Down here, the darkness is not absence, it is presence, wrapping you in the certainty that this place has endured longer than any memory above. You breathe in, you breathe out. You let the silence guide you forward. The tunnel ahead dips in a slow, measured descent, as if the city is gently guiding you toward its core. You follow it without hurry, feeling the cool breath of the underground brushing against your skin. The air is steady here, unmoving yet alive, carrying with it a faint trace of minerals and something older still, a scent you cannot name but that feels like the memory of rain on stone. Each step sounds softer now, as though the ground itself is listening. You pause and let your eyes rest half closed. The darkness beyond your light is not threatening, it's an invitation. Somewhere, far above, the surface world is turning through its night, Wind shifting over rooftops, leaves whispering, maybe a dog barking in the distance. Down here, none of that reaches you. Instead, you hear the quiet patience of stone, the steady rhythm of your own breathing, and the faintest echo of dripping water far away. The corridor bends sharply, and when you round the corner, you are met with a vast space that seems impossible in its size. The ceiling rises high enough that your light doesn't touch it, disappearing into shadow. The walls curve outward, then inward again, forming a great rounded chamber. It feels like standing inside a hollowed-out heart. Your steps send soft ripples of sound across the room before they fade entirely. In the center stands a single pillar of untouched rock, left to support the ceiling. It is broad, strong, and old, older than the memory of those who carved around it. You run your hand along its surface, feeling the coolness, the solidity. You imagine the builders working in dim light, their tools striking rhythm against the stone, voices low but determined. This was not a place made in haste. It was shaped with care, layer by layer, until the earth gave way to their design. Scattered around the base of the pillar are shallow depressions in the floor, almost circular. They could have been places for fires or for storing jars and tools. Your mind offers images. A group gathered around a low flame, shadows swaying across the walls, someone speaking softly while others listen. The way sound carries here, you think, it must have been a place for voices, a chamber where words could gather and linger. On one wall you notice a narrow passage branching off, smaller than the others you've seen. It feels less like a main tunnel and more like a hidden way, perhaps known only to some. You kneel and peer inside. The air drifting from it is cooler still, with a faint freshness that tells you it connects somehow to the outside world, even from this depth. It could have been a hidden escape route, or a secret entrance. Or perhaps it led to another part of the city entirely, a section still unseen, still waiting. You move back to the main chamber and stand still again, closing your eyes. The silence here is thick, almost textured. You imagine all the lives that once moved through it, the laughter of children running ahead of their parents, the low murmur of evening meals, the occasional ring of a hammer against stone. It is strange to think that all of this happened without the sun ever touching these walls. The people here would have lived by the light of lamps, measuring their days not by sunrise and sunset, but by the cycle of tasks, of needs, of the community's rhythm. The chamber narrows into another tunnel, and you follow it. The walls are closer here, and the floor slopes gently downward. In the beam of your light, you see the marks left by the builder's tools, long, shallow scrapes in the tuff, each one a reminder of the hands that carved this path. You let your fingers drift over them as you walk, almost as if greeting each one. After a time, the tunnel opens into a room with a series of deep alcoves carved into its walls. They are tall and narrow, each large enough for a person to stand inside. You step into one, feeling how the stone embraces you on three sides. From here, the sounds in the room shift. Voices from the center would echo differently, perhaps making it easier to hear. Could this have been a place for guards to stand, hidden in shadow, watching over the entry? Or perhaps these alcoves were for storage, filled with supplies ready to be moved when needed. At the far end of the room, a wide archway leads into yet another descent. You pause here, sensing that each step forward is taking you deeper, not just into the earth, but into the city's purpose. You think about the people who lived here, how they must have known every turn, every corner. In times of danger, they could have moved quickly to seal off sections, guiding their families to safety behind the great rolling stone doors. And in times of peace, they could have opened the city like a great breathing organism, letting air and life flow through every chamber. You descend again, the steps uneven but steady. The walls here are darker, perhaps stained by centuries of touch, of torches brushing against them. The sound of water grows clearer, a slow, rhythmic drip. At the base of the steps you find it, a small, perfectly circular well carved into the floor. The water inside is still black as the surrounding stone, but when you lean closer you can see your light glimmering faintly on its surface. This was no ordinary feature. A well at this depth would have been life itself, allowing the people to remain here for as long as they needed, safe from the surface. You dip your fingers into the water. It is cold, almost startling after the dry air of the tunnels. You imagine it rising from deep underground springs, this same source feeding it for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. Above you, the city was carved and built and lived in. Beneath you, the earth still carries its own hidden rivers. As you leave the well, the tunnel continues on, but you stop to look back. In your light, the curve of the archway, the smooth edges of the floor, and the distant outline of the pillar chamber all seem to line up like pieces of a puzzle. This city was not a random warren of rooms. It was planned. Every space leads naturally to the next. Every turn offers both protection and possibility. The thought comes to you quietly, without warning. Perhaps this city was not built in response to danger, but in preparation for something inevitable. A place meant not just to hide from the world, but to outlast it. The idea lingers, and you cannot say if it feels comforting or unsettling. You take a deep breath and step forward again, letting the tunnel guide you toward whatever lies ahead. The air is cooler here, the darkness thicker. Your footsteps are slow, deliberate, and the silence is deep enough that it almost feels like you are moving through water. The city has its own pace, and you are learning it. The way it asks you to pause, to listen, to notice. Somewhere ahead, the sound changes. It is subtle at first, just a faint shift in the echo, but it draws you onward. The city is speaking again, though not in words you can understand. You walk on, the curve of the tunnel pulling you into the next chapter of its story. The tunnel begins to widen again, almost imperceptibly at first, until you notice the change in how your footsteps sound. They no longer bounce back so quickly from the walls. The echoes stretch farther, softer. The air feels more open too, though you still cannot see the next chamber ahead. It's as if the city is preparing you for something, letting you adjust to the new space before it reveals itself. When you finally step through the low arch, the room beyond greets you with a stillness that feels heavier, denser. The ceiling soars higher than any you have seen so far, vanishing into shadow above. Along the walls you see signs of soot, thin black traces rising like smoke frozen in time. This was once a place of fire and light. You stand in the center for a moment, letting your eyes follow the walls upward. You imagine them lined with oil lamps, their flames flickering, the light climbing toward the ceiling like small golden vines. The smell of burning oil, warm and earthy, would have been constant here. You can almost feel the gentle heat against your skin, a comfort in the cool depths of the earth. Near one side of the chamber, a raised platform juts out from the wall. Its edges are worn smooth, the surface slightly concave from centuries of use. You wonder if it was an altar, or perhaps a table for preparing food in great quantities. This could have been the city's central kitchen, a place where the community came together. You picture baskets of grain being poured into clay pots, water from the deep well added in measured amounts, herbs crushed between stones and sprinkled in with care. The floor bears marks, faint but visible, where countless feet must have stood, knelt, and worked. Here, life was not hidden in small corners, it was shared. The people who lived here did not just survive underground, they created a world for themselves, one that needed gathering places like this. At the far wall, you notice a series of small niches carved at shoulder height. They could have been for storing tools or utensils, perhaps for holding the lamps themselves. You run your hand along the edge of one, feeling the precision of its shape. Even in something so simple, there is care. The builders were not just making functional spaces, they were making spaces that felt complete. From this chamber, several smaller passages branch out. You choose one that curves gently to the right, its walls lined with shallow alcoves. Some are empty, others contain the faint impressions of objects long gone. Perhaps jars once rested here, filled with dried fruit or nuts, wrapped in cloth to keep them safe. You can almost see hands reaching in, taking just enough of the day's meal, the act as ordinary and comforting as opening a pantry door. The passage leads to another chamber, smaller but warmer in feel. The ceiling is lower, the walls closer, and the air carries a faint scent of something. Not quite smoke, not quite earth. It's the scent of many lives having passed through, leaving traces behind. You imagine this room filled with voices, children laughing, a story being told, a kind of low, steady conversation that doesn't need to be loud because everyone is close enough to hear. On one side, a carved bench runs the length of the wall. Its surface is worn smooth, the edges rounded by years of use. This could have been a place for rest after work, or a spot where elders shared news, advice, and memory. The underground would have been a world of constant closeness. No streets to separate neighbours, no open fields between homes. Privacy was different here, perhaps less about distance and more about understanding when to leave someone to their thoughts, even in the same room. From here, another tunnel slopes gently upward. As you walk, you notice how the air changes again, a touch lighter, as though you're approaching one of the city's great ventilation shafts. And soon you find it, a round opening in the ceiling, perfectly straight, rising into darkness. A faint breath of fresh air slips down to greet you. You tilt your head and imagine the long column of space above, reaching all the way to the surface. The people here designed their home so carefully that even 20 stories down the air would remain clear and moving. You linger beneath the shaft for a moment, closing your eyes and letting the coolness brush against your face. This air has travelled far, carrying with it the scent of a world you cannot see. Perhaps it passed over fields, through the branches of trees, across stones warmed by the sun, and now it finds you here, in the quiet heart of the earth. Continuing onward, you find yourself in a long, straight corridor. The floor is smoother than most you've walked so far, almost polished in places. The walls are higher too, giving the space a kind of grandeur despite its simplicity. You wonder if this was a main thoroughfare connecting important parts of the city. It feels like a spine, strong and sure, supporting everything around it. At the end of the corridor, another large chamber opens before you. This one is different. Its floor dips down into a central pit, shallow but clearly intentional. Around its edge are low stone ledges, perhaps for sitting. You imagine this as a gathering place for many people at once, perhaps for meetings, teaching, or ceremony. The voices of dozens could fill this space without straining, their words carried upward to the high ceiling. You take a seat on one of the ledges and listen. There is no sound but your own breath, yet you can almost feel the vibration of voices that once filled this place. You picture a teacher here, speaking to a circle of children, or a leader addressing the community in times of both danger and celebration. These walls have heard everything: fear, joy, grief, hope, and they hold it still, woven into their silence. From here, you notice another doorway, smaller than the rest. You pass through it and find yourself in a series of tiny rooms, each just large enough for a single person to lie down. Sleeping chambers, perhaps, carved in clusters. The air here is warmer, stiller, as if it has been shaped to hold the heat of many bodies through the night. You run your hand along the walls, imagining the softness of cloth laid out for bedding, the gentle murmur of people settling in to rest. In the dark, sleep would have come differently here, without the cycle of light and shadow, without the call of morning birds. People would have risen and rested according to the needs of the city, to the rhythm of shared work and shared meals. Time itself would have felt different, less rigid, more like a slow tide moving through the chambers. As you leave the sleeping rooms, you take one last look back. The city seems to breathe around you, its walls pulsing faintly with memory. You're beginning to understand that Derinkuyu is not simply a relic. It is an echo that still resonates, a shape carved into the earth that continues to hold the essence of those who lived here. Ahead, the tunnel turns again, leading deeper. The air cools, the light of your lamp pools against the walls, and the path feels both familiar and entirely unknown. You take another slow breath, letting the silence guide you forward. Somewhere beyond this curve, the city waits to show you something new. The tunnel narrows again, drawing you forward like a thread through the eye of a needle. You feel it in your chest, the subtle change in air pressure, the way the silence here is even denser, as if you're moving into a part of the city that does not welcome noise. The walls are close enough that you could reach out and touch both sides at once. The stone feels smoother here, less raw than in earlier chambers, as though it had been shaped not only for function, but for precision. You slow your steps. Your breathing deepens. In this part of the city, you sense an almost deliberate shift in craftsmanship. The edges of the tunnels are straighter, the curves more exact. The cuts in the rock bear a rhythm, not the hurried marks of survival, but the steady, patterned strokes of builders who are working towards something exacting. It makes you wonder if the official story, the one that speaks of hurried refuge from war, tells the whole truth. As you turn a corner, your light falls on another massive rolling stone door, perfectly round, resting in its carved groove. You pause before it, imagining the weight. Tons of solid rock that could be rolled into place by just a few people, using hidden handles carved into its edge. The precision is startling. The door fits so tightly into the wall that not even a blade of light could pass through when closed. Even with today's technology, fitting a piece of stone this size so perfectly would require planning, measurement, and skill. Yet here it is, deep underground, made by hands from centuries ago. The official account says these doors were for protection, a defense against invading armies. And yes, That could be true. But as you run your palm across the stone, you can't help but wonder, if they were only meant to block a passage in times of attack, why make them so flawless? Why make them so numerous? You move on, deeper into the passage, and the air cools further. The next chamber is small, but its ceiling rises high, tapering into a shaft that disappears into darkness above. You recognize it as one of the great ventilation shafts, the kind that runs through multiple levels of the city. You stand beneath it and feel the steady breath of air drifting down, a current so subtle and perfect that it's easy to forget how impossible it is. 18 to 20 levels deep, yet the air here is fresh. Modern engineers who study Derinkuyu have remarked on this. The shafts are positioned with such precision that they draw air through the entire network without allowing smoke, dust or stale air to linger. No fans, no machinery, just stone, space and ancient understanding. This is where the contradiction becomes harder to ignore. If this city was truly a medieval construction, hurriedly adapted in times of crisis, how did its builders achieve this kind of environmental control? You think of other fortifications from the same period, castles, citadels, watchtowers, and you realize that none of them match this feat, not even above ground. You leave the shaft and follow another corridor, noticing that the floor beneath you is subtly angled in certain places. At first, you think it's a natural slope, but then you see the pattern. The slopes direct water toward narrow channels carved into the stone. Flood prevention, in a place that receives no rainfall. These channels lead into small sumps and basins, each one set lower than the last, guiding water out of living spaces and into storage or waste areas. This isn't just clever, it's overbuilt. A level of planning that suggests not just defense, but permanence. This was a place designed to be lived in for months, even years, without returning to the surface. You begin to notice other anomalies too. In some of the deeper walls, stone is harder, darker, almost as if the builders chose a different material for structural strength. The cut here is clean, precise, and strangely uniform, as if the stone had been softened before shaping. The thought lingers in your mind, the idea that perhaps these sections were made much earlier, with methods lost to later generations. A narrow side passage draws your attention. You step inside and find a room unlike the others, a perfect rectangle, its floor smooth as if worn by something other than feet. The air here is cooler still, and it carries a faint resonance when you speak softly. You try it, a single word whispered, and it comes back to you, stretched and strange. Acoustic design. Was this intentional? If so, why here, in this small hidden chamber? Was it used for music, for ritual, for something we can no longer name? The official guides might say these are coincidences, that medieval masons were simply skilled. But as you walk through this section, you feel the weight of intention pressing in. There are too many perfect alignments, too many choices that seem meant for more than just practicality. You find yourself thinking about time differently down here. Perhaps this city was not built all at once. Perhaps what you are seeing is the work of many ages, some parts carved in haste during war, others shaped in an older time, when the knowledge of stone was deeper, when the reasons for living underground were not just human conflict, but something larger. You return to the main corridor, and the light of your lamp glances off another anomaly. A block of stone that doesn't quite match the rest of the wall. Its texture is smoother, its edges sharper. You touch it, and it feels faintly warmer, though that could be your imagination. Was this a repair, a marker, or something deliberately hidden. The thought stirs an unease in you, but not fear. It's the unease of standing at the edge of an answer you cannot yet reach. You sense that the city is not resisting you. It is simply waiting for you to see more. As you continue, you pass through another large hall, this one divided by two massive columns carved directly from the bedrock. The symmetry is striking. On the far wall, 3 evenly spaced openings lead into darkness. You step toward them, feeling the way your footsteps shift in sound as you cross the threshold. The floor here is harder, the temperature cooler. You wonder if this section was deliberately separated from the rest, perhaps for storage of something valuable or dangerous. You linger in the center, letting the silence fill your ears. This part of the city feels older, not just by centuries, but by something harder to measure, a kind of deep stillness that belongs to places long abandoned. Somewhere in this quiet, a thought forms. Maybe the contradiction is not that Derinkuyu is too advanced for its supposed time, but that it is too many times at once. Layers of human history, each adding to what came before, until the origin is buried as deeply as the city itself. You turn to leave, and as you do, you glance once more at the rolling stone door, the ventilation shafts, the perfect slopes in the floor. The questions follow you like the echo of your own steps. Was this truly the work of medieval masons alone? Or was something older already here, waiting to be rediscovered, reshaped and used again? You move on, deeper still. The contradictions are no longer a whisper. They are everywhere you look. And in the darkness ahead, you sense that the impossible details are waiting for you, ready to speak if you are willing to listen. The corridor ahead feels different before you even step into it. The air is cooler, sharper, as if it has been untouched for far longer than the places you've already walked. Your light reaches forward, and for a moment you catch the faint glimmer of moisture on the walls, tiny beads that shine and vanish as you pass. The ground slopes gently, drawing you down into a place that feels more like the city's hidden marrow than one of its public chambers. You slow your pace, letting the silence expand. Down here, every sound you make feels deliberate. Your breathing is louder, your footsteps more defined, and even the small scuff of your hand brushing the stone leaves a long echo behind you. This part of Derinkuyu feels preserved, not just empty, but sealed in some way, as though its purpose was never meant to be altered. The tunnel straightens, then opens suddenly into a space unlike anything you've seen before. The walls curve with a precision that is almost unnatural, and the ceiling forms a perfect dome. You tilt your head back and see how the light from your lamp flows evenly over the surface. No jagged edges, no signs of hasty carving. This was not shaped by chance. It was engineered to be exact. You test your voice here, speaking a single soft word. The sound doesn't just echo, it swells, gathering itself and returning to you in a low, resonant hum. The chamber seems to hold the note, vibrating faintly in your chest. You try again, and the same thing happens, as if the room itself is tuned to a frequency. You remember the small rectangular space you passed earlier with its strange acoustics, and you begin to see a pattern. These were not accidents. Someone understood sound deeply enough to shape stone into an instrument. Why would an underground city need chambers like this? Was it for music, for ritual, for communication over long distances through the rock? You can't know for certain, but the effect is undeniable. This place was made to speak back. At the center of the dome lies a perfectly circular depression in the floor, just a few inches deep, smooth as water. You kneel beside it, running your fingers along the edge. The curve is flawless, as though it were cast from a mold rather than carved by hand. If water had ever pooled here, it would have reflected the entire ceiling above like a mirror. Perhaps that was the point. A place where those below could look up and see the reflection of what was above, even if only in light and shadow. You rise and move toward the far side of the chamber, where another passage waits. But as you step closer, you notice the floor beneath you changes texture. The smooth stone gives way to something subtly different, harder, darker, flecked with mineral specks that catch the light. You crouch to touch it and realize it is not the same volcanic tuff that makes up most of the city. This material feels alien to the rest, as if it was brought from somewhere else. Why import stone into a city already carved from rock? The question lingers in your mind as you step into the next corridor. The walls here are lined with long, shallow grooves, perfectly parallel, running the entire length of the passage. They are not decorative, but they are too regular to be random. You trail your hand along them and feel how evenly spaced they are, how each one is the same depth. Perhaps they were functional, to channel air, to hold beams, to guide water. Or perhaps they were markers, a kind of code cut into the stone for those who knew how to read it. The corridor ends at a small square room, its walls bare except for one. On that wall your light catches something unusual, a set of perfectly drilled holes, each the width of your thumb, arranged in a pattern that does not match any tool marks you've seen so far. You press your fingers into one, feeling the smoothness inside. They're not deep, only a few inches, but the precision is striking. No chips, no irregular edges. These were made with something capable of turning in perfect circles, something far beyond the chisels and hammers we imagine in ancient hands. You lean back against the opposite wall and take in the room as a whole. It feels deliberate, like it had a specific, perhaps even mechanical purpose. Was this some kind of workshop, a place to assemble or repair, or something else entirely, something we would not recognize because we no longer have the thing it was made for? Leaving the square room, you find yourself in another passage, narrower now, the walls close enough to make your shoulders almost brush them. The stone here is warm, not from heat, but from the density of it. The light from your lamp reflects more strongly here, and you realize this section has been polished. Not smoothed, but polished, as if it was meant to shine faintly even in the dim light of oil lamps. You picture the glow dancing along these walls, guiding the way without blinding the eyes. You emerge into yet another chamber, smaller but strangely elegant. Along one wall, a set of shallow steps rise into a platform. The steps are worn, yet they are too narrow for casual use. You climb them slowly, standing at the top and looking down over the room. From here the acoustics change again. Your voice projects, carrying more clearly to the far corners. It is the perfect place to address a small crowd. Was this a kind of council platform, a storyteller's perch, or something more solemn? The further you go, the more you feel the weight of impossibility pressing in. The official story says this was a medieval refuge, expanded by necessity. But what you've seen, the perfect domes, the resonant chambers, the imported stone, the drilled precision, all of it hints at something more complex. You think of the way the ventilation shafts work, how the air flows as if guided by an invisible hand. You think of the water channels cut with such precision that they still serve their purpose centuries later, and you think of the way this place has endured, untouched by collapse, resistant to damp, its ceilings high and true. If this city was built only 1,000 years ago, why are there sections that seem older, techniques that feel foreign to that time? Could it be that Derinkuyu is not one city, but many, layers of habitation, each built on the bones of the last, stretching so far back that the first builders are no longer remembered? You move onward, your light bobbing against the walls. Ahead, the tunnel bends, leading to yet another section of the city's deep heart. You feel the presence of more anomalies waiting there, things that will challenge the official story even further. But for now, you pause. You stand still in the quiet, letting the impossible details you've seen settle into your mind like stones in water. The echoes here are not just sound, they are questions, waiting for someone willing to listen long enough to hear the answers. And as you turn the corner, you feel certain. The deeper you go, the stranger and older this city will become. The tunnel opens into a chamber where the air feels just a touch warmer, as though it has been shaped by more recent breath. The walls here are smoother in some places, rougher in others, as if touched by different hands in different centuries. You pause in the center, letting your light drift across the stone, and it feels like you've stepped into a meeting ground, not for people long gone, but for their stories, each layered over the other. This is where the official history begins to take hold, where archaeologists and scholars place their markers. According to them, Derinkuyu belongs mostly to the Byzantine period, somewhere between the 8th and 12th centuries CE. They speak of a time when the surface world was a place of uncertainty, of raids, of wars, of shifting borders between empires. In their telling, these tunnels were carved and expanded as refuge during Arab-Byzantine conflicts, a place where thousands could vanish underground until the threat passed. The theory is simple. People dug because they had to. Families and livestock were brought down here in times of danger, food and water stored in the deeper levels. The great stone doors were rolled into place, sealing the community inside. Ventilation shafts kept the air fresh. Wells kept thirst at bay. Days or weeks would pass in this underground quiet, until it was safe to return above. As you walk slowly along the chamber's edge, you imagine that version of the story, the rush to prepare, the fear that must have accompanied every descent. You picture guards stationed at key points, listening for the sound of footsteps in the passages. You see mothers keeping their children close, elders whispering prayers, the low hum of voices blending with the drip of water and the faint smell of cooking fires. The Byzantine explanation has weight to it. The architecture does match other underground cities in Cappadocia. The rolling stone doors, the animal stalls, the storage rooms, all of these fit a defensive purpose. And it's true that this region saw centuries of turmoil, enough to make such a refuge not just useful, but necessary. But even as you walk, you feel the edges of that story fray. The historians themselves admit that no single people built Derinkuyu from the ground down in one go. Some say it began earlier, during the Roman era. Others push it further back, to the Phrygians in the 8th century BCE. And still others suspect that the first passages were carved even before that, in the late Bronze Age or earlier, by hands we no longer remember. The further back the guesses go, the fainter the evidence becomes. Pottery shards, tool marks, a few ancient coins. These are the breadcrumbs left for modern eyes. They, tell part of the story, but not all of it. And in the absence of certainty, scholars fill the gaps with their best reasoning. You step into a side passage, its walls close and quiet, and you think about that. How history, in the end, is a kind of careful imagining. You can line up the facts, you can measure the chambers and date the soot, but the choice of how to connect those dots is a human one. Even the most orthodox version of Derinkuyu's story is built on interpretation. You emerge into another space, smaller and more intimate, where your light touches faint carvings along the wall. They are shallow and worn, their shapes unclear. Some archaeologists dismiss such marks as tool scratches. Others believe they could be symbols, perhaps even remnants of a language. If the latter is true, then the city's story is far older, because no Byzantine or Roman script matches what these marks seem to suggest. This is the point where orthodox theories meet their limits. The accepted narrative holds together well for the upper levels, the more accessible chambers. But in the deeper levels, where the engineering is most refined and the air still flows without flaw, the explanations become softer, less certain. Some scholars will admit quietly that certain design features seem out of place for the medieval world. Not impossible, but remarkable enough to raise an eyebrow. As you run your fingers along the cool stone, you try to imagine what it would feel like to dedicate your life to studying a place like this. You might spend years cataloguing tool marks, mapping corridors, comparing notes with other researchers. You'd build a framework for the story, knowing full well that each new discovery could shift its shape, and you'd have to hold two truths at once, the one that fits the evidence and the one that whispers from the unanswered questions. In the official telling, there are no mysteries too large. The city was dug by human hands with human tools, improved over generations. Each level was a practical addition, a new stable, a larger kitchen, another storage room. The complexity of the design was born from necessity, not from lost knowledge. And perhaps that's true. Perhaps necessity was enough to create something this vast. But as you move deeper into the passage, the floor sloping downward once again, you feel how the air shifts with each turn. The temperature changes minutely. The sound of your own steps takes on a different quality. And you wonder whether necessity alone explains such subtle mastery. The scholars who stand firmly in the orthodox camp do not dismiss the city's wonder. They celebrate it. To them, Derinkuyu is proof of what humans can achieve with persistence and ingenuity, even without advanced tools. They see its beauty in the story of communities who adapted, survived, and thrived despite the threats of their time. You reach another chamber, one of the larger ones you've seen, and the shape of it is almost ceremonial. A high ceiling, a wide floor, niches along the walls. The official explanation would call this a communal meeting hall, perhaps used for planning or worship, and perhaps it was. The facts, as far as they go, fit that picture neatly. But you stand there in the quiet, the official narrative in one hand and the anomalies in the other, and you begin to see why Derinkuyu draws so many interpretations. Even within the strict boundaries of academic study, the city resists a single, neat explanation. Its story bends to the evidence you choose to see. You take a slow breath and let the orthodox version settle in your mind. It is a good story, one of resilience, adaptation, and human determination. It honors the skill of the builders, the courage of those who lived here, and the history of a region that has always been a crossroads of civilizations. But you also feel the weight of the unanswered questions pressing gently from the shadows. The official account may be the safest story, but it is not the only one. And in the darker corners of the city, where the air grows cooler and the stone feels older, other possibilities wait. You step toward the next tunnel, knowing that what lies ahead will leave the comfort of the orthodox behind. The accepted version has been told. Now it's time to walk into the spaces where the official story begins to falter, and where other voices, both scholarly and speculative, will begin to speak. The tunnel ahead is narrower, its walls untouched by the soot marks you've seen in the upper levels. The air feels cooler, cleaner, as though fewer people have passed this way in centuries. You keep your light close to the stone, watching the walls bend and shift with the natural contours of the rock. This part of the city feels quieter, not abandoned, but holding its breath. It is here, perhaps, that the alternative stories begin to find their footing. Some scholars, standing at the edges of the Orthodox camp, suggest that the Byzantine builders were not the originators of Derinkuyu, but inheritors. In their view, the deeper levels, with their flawless ventilation shafts, their perfectly curved ceilings, and their unusual stone types, may be remnants of an older city, one whose builders lived long before recorded history in this region. The Byzantines, according to this theory, simply expanded what was already there, reshaping it for their own needs. And then there are the more radical voices, those willing to speak aloud what others keep in the shadows. They suggest that Derinkuyu's roots could reach back into the deep prehistory of Anatolia, perhaps to the Hittites in the 2nd millennium BCE, or the Phrygians after them. But some push further still, to a time when the land was home to cultures so ancient they have no name, no surviving records, only stone. In their telling, these first builders may have been survivors of some catastrophe, forced below ground not for months or years, but for generations. You walk slowly, letting the weight of these possibilities settle over you. In the official story, this city is a refuge. In these alternative views, it is a legacy, a handprint left by a civilization erased from the surface. The purpose shifts too. For the Byzantines, it was protection from war. For the imagined ancients, it could have been shelter from something greater, a changing climate, a volcanic winter, or even a cosmic event. Some who study myths point to stories that seem to mirror this idea. In Cappadocia's local folklore, there are tales of people who lived inside the earth to escape the fire from the sky. Elsewhere in the world, similar stories surface. The Hopi of North America tell of their ancestors emerging from underground after a great destruction. Ancient Indian texts speak of the Naga people, who dwell in vast subterranean cities. Greek myth tells of labyrinths where humans and something more than human once walked side by side. You pause in a small chamber and imagine it lit with those older lives. Perhaps the walls were once marked with symbols now long gone, worn away by time and later builders. Perhaps the tools they used were not bronze or iron, but something else entirely. Something that left marks we no longer recognize. The grooves, the strange polished stone, the perfect curves. Maybe they're the only language those people left behind. In the alternative narratives, Derinkuyu becomes more than a city. It becomes a link in a chain of global mysteries, like the megaliths of Göbekli Tepe to the east, or the underground complexes rumoured beneath Malta, or the enigmatic stone tunnels in South America whose origins are still debated. In each case, there is the suggestion that humanity's story is older, more complicated, and far stranger than the tidy lines of our history books. You move deeper into the passage, your light tracing the walls. There are small alcoves here, each no larger than a doorway, spaced evenly apart. They could be storage spaces, yes, but their repetition is so precise that you wonder if they served another function. Perhaps beds, perhaps stations for workers in some long-lost task. The alternative theories lean heavily on these kinds of details, asking why practical needs were met with such geometric perfection. Some of the more speculative thinkers propose that this underground city might have been designed not just for physical survival, but for something spiritual or energetic. They speak of the stone acting as a shield from harmful forces, of the shafts channeling not just air but some form of resonance. These ideas stray far from the comfort of academia, but as you stand here, feeling the silence hum faintly in your chest, you understand why people might believe them. One theory, whispered more than written, suggests that places like Derinkuyu were built in anticipation of a cyclical disaster. Floods, fire, or something cosmic that returns after many thousands of years. In that view, the city is less a reaction to an event than a preparation for one. The precision, the over-engineering, the comfort of the deeper levels, all of it would make sense if the goal was to live out decades below ground. You think of the great rolling stone doors again, and how they could seal off entire sections of the city. In the orthodox view, they are for defense against human enemies. But in the alternative view, they might be barriers against something else. Perhaps not even human at all. It's here that the lines between archaeology and legend blur entirely. The tunnel bends, and you find yourself at a shaft that plunges downward beyond the reach of your light. A cool draft rises from it, steady and sheer. You imagine someone standing here centuries ago, lowering a rope, disappearing into the darkness for reasons now lost to us. Did they descend to fetch water, to explore, or to escape something even deeper still? The alternative stories love such moments. They point to them as evidence of deeper hidden levels, perhaps ones never mapped or explored. Some of the more imaginative claims speak of connections between Derinkuyu and other underground cities in Cappadocia, a network stretching for miles, allowing whole populations to move unseen beneath the earth. A few even claim that these networks once connected to places far beyond Anatolia, though no physical proof has been found. Still, the thought of a hidden web beneath the surface lingers in your mind. As you step away from the shaft, you realize that in the alternative telling, Derinkuyu is not just a place in history, but a place outside of it. It belongs partly to archaeology, partly to myth, and partly to the realm of unanswered questions. Whether these theories hold truth or not, they invite a kind of curiosity the orthodox story cannot match. They pull at the edges of what we think we know, and they do so with the same quiet patience as the city itself. The passage ahead widens slightly, and you follow it until the air changes again, warmer now, carrying a faint scent of the surface world. You may be closer to one of the great shafts, or perhaps to a place where sunlight filters down in some thin, hidden way. But even here, surrounded by the familiar feel of stone and shadow, the older possibilities cling to you. You breathe slowly, letting the two stories, the orthodox and the alternative, sit side by side in your mind. Neither erases the other. Perhaps they're both true in their own ways, layered like the levels of the city itself. And perhaps, like the stone, the truth will hold its shape whether we name it or not. The passage ahead is softer underfoot, the stone worn smooth by centuries of movement. Your light touches the walls and finds them less precise here. Not crude, but more weathered, as though they have been breathing longer than the rest. The air is warmer, carrying a faint trace of something organic, a whisper of soil and roots. It feels closer to the living world above, and it is here, in this warmer breath of the underground, that the stories of the city stop being bound to dates and tools and instead slip into the realm of memory and myth. Folklore has a way of curling through the cracks of history, surviving where records fail. In the villages above Derinkuyu, people still tell old stories passed down through families, tales not of Byzantines or Phrygians, but of a time before time when the earth itself opened to shelter its children. One such story speaks of the fire from the sky. The elders say there was a day when the heavens burned, not with sunlight, but with a searing flame that rolled across the land, blackening fields and boiling rivers. The people, warned by dreams and omens, fled into the earth. The stone swallowed them whole, keeping them safe until the fire faded and the world above was cool enough to walk again. In this telling, Derinkuyu was not built in fear of war, but in anticipation of a storm that came from far beyond the mountains. You picture it as you walk, the sky turned to molten gold, the ground trembling, the air thick with ash. And then, the cool descent into safety, children carried in arms, baskets of grain clutched tight. The great stone doors rolled into place with a final echoing thud. In this story, the city is less a fortress and more a womb, cradling life in the darkness until the world could be reborn. Another tale, older still, speaks of the people of the deep, not human, or at least not entirely. They were said to be taller, their eyes paler, their skin the colour of the stone itself. According to the legend, they had always lived below ground, long before the surface knew farming or cities. They were the ones who first shaped the stone, who carved the shafts and domes with tools of light and sound. When humans finally came to the region, the people of the deep allowed them to use parts of the city, teaching them how to breathe and live in the dark. But eventually these deeper dwellers vanished, leaving only their silent chambers behind. The story is told with a kind of reverence, as though speaking ill of these beings might wake them from their long rest. In the markets above ground, an old proverb survives: "Do not shout into the deep, for the deep may answer." You can almost hear that warning in the hush of these tunnels now. There are lighter legends too, stories of hidden feasts in the stone halls, of music played on instruments whose echoes could be heard from one end of the city to the other. Some say the stone itself could sing when struck in the right place, and that there were rooms built just for the joy of that sound. A few even whisper of chambers where dreams were shared, where sleeping close to certain walls would cause those within to see the same visions. As you turn a corner, you find a small room that seems to hum faintly even in silence. It is round, with a single niche in the wall at eye level. You wonder if this is one of those places from the stories, a chamber where sound and dream meet. The niche might once have held a lamp casting light upward so that the entire room glowed. You stand there, half expecting to feel the pull of some forgotten magic. Further along, another myth surfaces in your mind, one told in hushed voices about a network of tunnels that stretch far beyond Cappadocia. In this tale, Derinkuyu is only one gate among many. Beneath the earth lies a vast world called Agatha, a hidden kingdom where rivers run with light and trees grow from glowing soil. The people of the deep retreated there when the surface grew too dangerous, and from time to time they send messengers to check if the world above is ready to remember them. It is a story you've heard echoed in far-off places, in the Tibetan Shambhala, in the Norse Svartalfheimr, in the Hopi's Sipapuni. Always there is the same theme, an entrance to another realm, hidden in plain sight. You step into a larger chamber now, and its shape strikes you as strange. It is wider than most, but the floor tilts gently toward the center, as if designed to draw your attention inward. In the middle, a circular stone is set into the floor, not a door, but a disc flush with the ground. You kneel and touch it. The surface is smoother than the surrounding stone, almost polished. The villagers above might tell you this is the listening stone, where the old ones would place their ear to the floor and hear the voices of the deep world. Whether or not that's true, the idea lingers with you. You imagine someone kneeling here long ago, eyes closed, hearing the slow pulse of water through stone, the whisper of air moving in distant shafts, the muted footsteps of lives in another layer below. Folklore does not care about dates or carbon samples. It moves through time like water, taking the shape of the vessel that holds it. In these tunnels, the vessel is the stone itself, and the stories seep into it until the boundary between history and myth blurs. The elders above say that if you walk far enough in the dark, you will find a place where the walls are warm to the touch, where the air tastes like metal, and where you should not linger, because that is where the people of the deep still watch over their city. The air in the passage ahead grows cooler again, and you can feel the change in your skin. You pass a side tunnel, its entrance low and narrow, and you imagine the courage it would take to crawl into it without knowing where it ends. Perhaps that is where some of the oldest stories still live, untouched by human breath for centuries. And then, without realizing it, you feel the weight of the myths pressing on you, not in fear, but in a way that makes you walk more quietly, breathe more gently. You start to understand why the villagers above still leave offerings at certain cracks in the earth, or why they warn children not to wander into the old ventilation shafts. It's not that they truly believe the people of the deep will emerge, it's that they've inherited the instinct to respect what lies below. You pause in a small alcove, resting your hand against the wall. The stone is cool, solid, and silent. Yet you cannot shake the feeling that somewhere in its depths it remembers. Maybe it remembers the fire from the sky. Maybe it remembers hands that shaped it for reasons we no longer understand. Or maybe it simply remembers the countless lives it has sheltered, each one adding a layer to the story until the truth is not one version, but all of them woven together. As you move on, you realize that in a place like this, folklore isn't just decoration around the edges of history. It is the way the city speaks when facts fall silent. And in the long stretch of darkness ahead, you feel as though you are about to hear the next part of that whisper. The air in the next corridor feels as though it has been carried from far away, drifting through unseen channels before finding its way here. You walk slowly, letting the quiet between your footsteps lengthen, and you think about the stories you've just heard from the stone. Not the official histories, not even the local legends, but the deeper patterns beneath them. Folklore, you realize, rarely exists in isolation. It is like a seed that drifts across oceans and deserts, taking root wherever it lands. And in the case of Derinkuyu, there are seeds of the same story in places far beyond Cappadocia. You step into a wide, low-ceilinged chamber. The walls here are unadorned, their surface even and plain, as though carved simply to hold the air. It feels like a place to stop and listen. So you do. And as the silence wraps around you, your mind begins to wander to the parallels, the echoes of this underground city in other corners of the world. In the deserts of the American Southwest, the Hopi people speak of their emergence from the Sipapuni, a sacred place where their ancestors lived below ground during a time of great destruction above. Guided by spirit beings, they climbed to the surface when the earth was ready to welcome them again. The details are different, but the shape of the story is familiar. A refuge beneath the earth, a people preserved until the world could be renewed. Far to the east, in the mountains of Tibet, the legend of Shambhala tells of a hidden kingdom, accessible only to those pure of heart. Some say it lies in a remote valley, others claim it is entirely underground, a realm of light and wisdom protected from the chaos of the surface world. The entrances, according to these stories, are scattered and disguised, just as Derinkuyu's entrance was once hidden behind an ordinary house. Even in ancient Greece, the myth of the labyrinth holds an echo. While most think of Crete and the Minotaur, there are other less told versions of the story, ones that speak of labyrinths not as prisons but as sanctuaries, a place where those who entered could vanish from the eyes of the world. And though the Greek labyrinth is often imagined as a horizontal maze, who's to say that some of these labyrinths weren't vertical, descending deep into the earth like the spiral of Derinkuyu? You move into another corridor, narrower this time, with smooth walls that curve slightly inward. The acoustics here are strange. Your footsteps sound softer than they should, almost muffled. It reminds you of stories from Malta, where subterranean complexes like Alsaflieni Hypogeum were said to carry sound in unusual ways. They're chambers designed to amplify certain tones while swallowing others. Archaeologists there have puzzled over its oracle room, a space that resonates powerfully at a specific frequency, much like some of the chambers you've already passed in Derinkuyu. Then there is the Andean highlands, where the Chachapoya and Inca peoples told of vast tunnels running beneath the mountains, said to connect distant cities. In some tales, these tunnels were refuge from both enemy armies and the wrath of the gods. Even now, fragments of these underground passages are found, carved with skill, yet leading into collapsed depths no one dares to explore fully. The stories begin to layer over each other in your mind. In each, there is the same core, a place below the earth, built or found in times of danger, kept secret, designed to sustain life until it could return above. Whether it's fire from the sky, floods that swallowed the land, or enemies who hunted across open ground, the solution is always the same. Go down, wait, endure. As you turn a corner, you find yourself before a shaft that rises straight into darkness. You stand beneath it, imagining how many other shafts there might be in other parts of the world, serving the same purpose. The engineers of Derinkuyu cut theirs with such precision that they still breathe air through the city today. Could other ancient builders have shared this knowledge, passing it across continents in ways we've long forgotten? There's a theory, not widely accepted but whispered among certain researchers, that these similarities are not coincidence, that long before our written history began, there was a shared understanding among scattered peoples, how to move stone, how to channel air, how to hide and live beneath the surface. Maybe it was knowledge born of necessity, each culture arriving at the same solutions independently. Or maybe, as the more daring voices suggest, it was passed on from an earlier unified civilization that left traces in myths rather than in monuments. You walk on, the light from your lamp playing against the stone. Another chamber opens, this one small and circular, with a perfectly domed ceiling. It feels familiar, like the resonance room you found earlier, and you decide to test it. You hum softly and the note swells, bouncing gently between the walls. You imagine a builder on the other side of the world making the same discovery, shaping stone not only for shelter but for sound. In Australia, Aboriginal Dreamtime. Stories tell of the old ones who travelled underground, moving unseen between sacred places. In North Africa, the Berber people speak of hidden wells that lead to entire chambers below the desert. In Japan, certain Shinto shrines guard entrances said to lead to Shikushindo, the animal realm beneath the earth. And across the Pacific in Polynesia, there are tales of ancestors emerging from the underworld islands of their gods. It is tempting to dismiss these as coincidence. Humans have always been drawn to caves, after all. But in each story, the underground is not merely a place of burial or fear. It is a place of preservation, a seed vault for humanity itself. You step into a low passage, your head nearly brushing the ceiling, and you think about how such similarities could exist without contact between these far-flung cultures. Perhaps it's simply because the earth is the same everywhere. Stone behaves the same in the Andes as it does in Cappadocia. Or perhaps our ancestors, no matter where they lived, shared an unspoken understanding. When the world above becomes dangerous, the safest place is beneath it. The tunnel opens once more, and you stand at its mouth, breathing in the cool, steady air. You think about how myths are often dismissed as fantasy, when in truth they are memory wearing the clothes of story. If enough cultures across enough continents remember going underground, maybe it's because they truly did, again and again, in cycles older than we know. Here in Derinkuyu, those cycles feel tangible. Each chamber could be part of a larger pattern, a repeating act of descent and return. And maybe, just maybe, these other myths are not distant cousins to this city's story, but siblings, all branches from the same hidden root. The light in your hand flickers slightly, and you realize you've been standing still for longer than you thought. Somewhere ahead, more of the city waits, and with it, perhaps, clues to why such places have been hidden, not just here, but everywhere. The passage ahead slopes downward again, its floor a little rougher than before, as though fewer feet have travelled here in recent centuries. The air cools and grows still, wrapping around you like a cloak. You keep walking, the beam of your light brushing across the walls, and you find yourself thinking about how easily such a place could vanish from the world's awareness. Not just through the slow forgetting of time, but through deliberate silence. Suppression. It's a heavy word, but it slips naturally into your thoughts here. There's something about Derinkuyu, its scale, its precision, its depth in both stone and a story, that feels too large to fit neatly into the boxes of accepted history. And when something doesn't fit, the easiest thing to do is to ignore it. In the modern era, the rediscovery of Derinkuyu was almost an accident. A man renovating his home broke through a wall and found a tunnel. The first stone pulled from a long buried doorway. Imagine if he hadn't. Imagine how many other hidden entrances are still sealed, mistaken for nothing more than an odd patch of masonry or a blocked cellar. Perhaps some have been found quietly, documented just enough to confirm their existence, and then covered over again. As you step into a broader chamber, you notice how easily this city could be made invisible. From above, there is no sign of it. No towers, no walls, no ruins scattered across the surface. Just houses, streets, farmland. To the casual eye, the land is ordinary, and that ordinariness is a kind of shield. If no one suspects what lies beneath, no one comes looking. There are stories whispered among those who spend their lives studying ancient sites of discoveries that never reach the public, finds that challenge established timelines or hint at technologies long thought impossible for the age they are assigned to. Sometimes the reason for their silence is political, a nation reluctant to stir debates that could undermine its official history. Sometimes the reason is economic, sites that might disrupt existing industries or development plans. And sometimes it's academic, scholars unwilling to reopen questions they believe are already answered. You think of the strange drilled holes you saw earlier, the perfectly domed chambers, the imported stone. Any one of these details examined deeply enough could start to unravel the orthodox story. And yet, how often do such anomalies get written off as quirks or as mistakes in observation? It's easier to fold them into the existing narrative than to risk building a new one from the ground up. The idea of suppression doesn't always mean something sinister. Sometimes it's simply the quiet decision to look away, to leave certain doors closed. In the case of Derinkuyu, maybe it's more comfortable to see it as a medieval refuge, a triumph of survival against the threats of its time, than to face the possibility that its origins are much older or stranger. You pass through a narrow archway into a corridor that runs perfectly straight for several meters. The floor here is flat, the walls smooth, and there's a faint draft that brushes your face as you walk. You realize how easy it would be for such a passage to be sealed off, a single block of stone rolled into place and plastered over, leaving no hint that anything lies beyond. Multiply that by hundreds of potential entry points, and the thought becomes dizzying. An entire network hidden not just by time, but by human choice. In the deeper parts of the city, you sense how much remains unmapped. Even with modern surveys, there are areas too narrow or unstable to explore fully. Passages that might lead to chambers no one has stood in for centuries. Some of those spaces might be collapsed, others might be intact, waiting. And if they held something truly unexpected, artifacts, inscriptions, technologies, would those who found them tell the world? Or would they quietly document and conceal, keeping the discovery in the shadows to avoid the noise it would bring? You recall the global parallels you've been carrying in your mind. Malta, the Andes, the American Southwest. In some of those places too, there are whispers of hidden sections, blocked tunnels, maps that end abruptly where the known meets the unknown. A pattern emerges. These sites are opened just enough to be acknowledged, but rarely enough to be fully understood. The room you step into now feels different. It's rectangular, with walls that taper slightly toward the ceiling. Along one side, you see marks that suggest something once rested there. Long grooves in the floor, faint discoloration on the wall. Perhaps a row of wooden structures, long since rotted away. If this was a storage space, it was built to hold something substantial. But whatever was here is gone, and with it, the clues to its purpose. You stand still, imagining an archaeologist finding this room decades ago, making notes, photographing the marks, and then deciding they weren't significant enough to pursue, or perhaps deciding they were too significant, that they didn't match what was expected. And so, the details would be filed away, buried not in earth, but in archives. The more you walk, the more you feel the tension between what is known and what is left unsaid. It's not that the known is false, but that it is incomplete. In the case of Derinkuyu, the silence may be as much about protecting the mystery as it is about controlling the narrative. Some things, after all, are easier to keep sacred when they're not entirely understood. Your light grazes over a small side passage, barely wide enough to step into. You peer inside and see that it narrows quickly, vanishing into darkness. You feel a pull to follow it, but you know how easily you could become disoriented here, how quickly the familiar could dissolve into a maze. You step back, the image of that narrow throat lingering in your mind. How many such passages exist, hidden behind unbroken walls or beneath layers of soil? Suppression can be active. Someone sealing a passage, removing artifacts, keeping records hidden. But it can also be passive, simply letting the years do their work while people's attention moves elsewhere. In the case of Derinkuyu, both seem possible. You pass into another chamber and see a well at its centre, the water dark and still. You kneel and let your fingertips skim the surface. It's cold, untouched by the warmth of the air above. The well is deep, its bottom lost in shadow, and you wonder how many such wells might exist in sealed parts of the city. How many have been quietly abandoned, their locations known only to those who keep the maps locked away. As you stand, the quiet presses in again. You realize that whatever the reasons, political, economic, academic, or simply practical, the result is the same. Parts of this city are hidden, whether for protection, control, or the comfort of certainty. The deeper story of Derinkuyu remains sealed, like one of its own rolling stone doors. You walk toward the next tunnel, the air shifting slightly as you pass through the arch. Somewhere ahead, the silence changes tone, softer, almost reflective. You know that what comes next is not about what has been hidden, but about what has been remembered. The tunnel ahead levels out, widening into a long, quiet hall. The walls here are unbroken and pale, as if the stone has been left untouched for a long time. The air feels different, not warmer or cooler, but still in a way that invites you to slow down even more. You let your steps fall softer, and as the darkness wraps closer, you begin to think not of dates or theories, but of meaning. There is something universal about going underground. Across cultures, across centuries, it carries a weight beyond the practical. Caves, tombs, catacombs, root cellars, subterranean temples, each of them, no matter where they are, draws the same instincts from us. To protect, to hide, to preserve, to wait. The surface belongs to movement, to change, to the constant turning of days. Below, there is constancy. Down here, the wind cannot reach you. The seasons cannot find you. You step into a circular chamber and notice how its walls curve inward toward the ceiling, almost like the inside of a bowl. The shape feels deliberate, not just for strength, but for a sense of enclosure. You stand in the center, and the stone seems to hold you the way a hand might cup water. It's a space that says, "You are safe now." Anthropologists have long spoken of the womb of the earth as a recurring symbol. In myths from around the world, descending into the ground often represents a return to origin, a journey back to the place from which life emerged. Sometimes it's the underworld of the dead. Sometimes it's the hidden world of spirits. Sometimes it's a sanctuary for the living, who will emerge renewed. In each version, the act of going below is not just physical, it is transformation. Derinkuyu embodies this completely. Even if it was built for war, its structure still cradles those inside it. The rolling stone doors, the closed quiet chambers, the steady breath of the ventilation shafts, all of it feels protective in a way that is almost parental. In the dark, there is no horizon to chase, no storm to outrun. There is only the here and now, the shared body of the city holding its people together. You imagine families gathered in one of these chambers during a time of danger. At first, perhaps, the dark would feel oppressive, the absence of the open sky unsettling. But after days, weeks, maybe even months, the darkness becomes familiar. The walls no longer close in, they wrap around you. You begin to feel the rhythms of this world, the way sound travels, the way air moves, the way the stone keeps its own steady temperature no matter what chaos reigns above. In this way, underground spaces often become places of deep trust. You must trust the builders, that their walls will hold, their air will flow, their water will remain pure. You must trust those beside you, that they will share resources, keep watch, respect the silence when it is needed, and you must trust yourself that you can endure without the endless distractions of the surface. You pass into a smaller room, its entrance low enough that you must bow slightly to step inside. That movement, bending, lowering yourself, feels symbolic too. In many traditions, bowing as you enter a sacred space is a sign of humility, of leaving the ordinary world behind. Here in the quiet of Derinkuyu, the same gesture seems to apply. You are not just entering a room, you're entering the earth's embrace. The symbolism deepens when you think of the city's levels. The deeper you go, the more protected you are. In myth, this mirrors the journey of descent. A hero or seeker traveling through layers of challenge or purification before reaching the deepest truth. For some, the journey ends in wisdom. For others, in rebirth. Derinkuyu's builders may not have been thinking in these symbolic terms. They may have been solving practical problems, making space for more people, more storage, more animals. But meaning often arises from necessity. A stair cut into stone is just a stair, until you descend it into silence, and realize it is also a path into another way of being. You move into another corridor and find a long bench carved directly into the wall. It's easy to imagine this as a resting place, but also as a seat for gathering, for telling stories, for teaching children the rules of life both above and below ground. In a place without sun or stars, knowledge must be carried in memory and voice. This is where the elders would have spoken, where decisions would have been made, where the invisible thread of the community was woven tighter. Even the city's ventilation shafts take on symbolic weight when you think of them this way. They are the connection between worlds, the channels that bring the breath of the sky into the belly of the earth. In mythic terms, they are like the world tree or the sacred mountain, a bridge between above and below. Without them, life here would fade. With them, the city can hold its people for as long as needed. You pause in a hallway where the air shifts subtly against your cheek. Somewhere above, the wind has turned. The sensation makes you think of renewal, that even in the depths, change still finds a way to reach you. This is part of the underground's paradox. It is both constant and connected. It shields you, but it does not cut you off entirely. In the philosophical sense, this mirrors why humans have always been drawn to such spaces. We seek stability, but we cannot bear complete isolation. The underground offers both. It is a place where you can stop moving without being forgotten, where you can disappear without ceasing to exist. You imagine standing in one of the deepest chambers during the height of its use. You would hear almost nothing. Perhaps the faint murmur of voices, the occasional step, the steady drip of water into a basin. You would feel the warmth of bodies around you, the slow rhythm of breathing, the quiet assurance that the world outside could rage as it pleased, and still you would be here, untouched. There is a lesson in that, you think. That survival is not always about speed or force. Sometimes it's about stillness. Sometimes the safest place is not to run, but to sink, to let the world pass over you while you wait in the dark. And when the time comes to rise again, you emerge not as you were, but changed. The city seems to understand this. Its walls do not demand anything from you. They do not push you toward action. They simply hold you. And in that holding you find space to rest, to reflect, to remember. As you step into the next passage, you feel the symbolism pressing gently against the practical. Derinkuyu is both, a masterpiece of human engineering and a deep well of meaning. The two cannot be separated, because the people who lived here were both practical and symbolic creatures. They built for survival, but they also built for belonging. Somewhere ahead, you know, the city will begin to close around you again, leading you deeper into its own quiet heart. And perhaps, if you keep walking, you'll begin to understand not just how it was made, but why. In the most human sense of that word. The air shifts, brushing across your skin like a whisper, and you are here again. Not in the past, not in the realm of theories or symbols, but in this moment. The present tense sharpens your senses. The beam of your light glides over a stone that had been here for lifetimes, and the soft scuff of your footsteps echoes ahead, fading into the dark before you reach it. You pause, letting the cool air fill your lungs. It tastes faintly of earth, clean and dry, as though it has never been touched by rain. Somewhere far above, that air slipped into a narrow opening, travelled down a winding shaft, and found you. You stand still just to feel it, a gentle, steady breath from a world you cannot see. Your hand drifts along the wall as you walk. The surface is uneven in places, smoothed in others, telling you where hands have touched most often. You can almost trace the movement of lives along these corridors. Children running their palms across the stone as they pass, elders pausing to steady themselves on the way to a gathering, someone carrying a basket brushing against the wall's curve. The city holds these gestures quietly, the way a tree holds the memory of the wind in its rings. The tunnel bends, and you follow it into a chamber where the air feels heavier, thicker, as if it has been sitting here a long time. Your light reveals a low ceiling, the stone carved close over the floor so that you instinctively bow your head. The movement slows you, making each step deliberate. The sound of your own breathing seems louder here, the only rhythm in the room. A narrow passage on the far side catches your attention. You step through, the walls closing around you until you could touch both sides without stretching your arms. Your light throws shadows forward in uneven shapes, and the air grows cooler again. Somewhere ahead, you hear it, faint but steady, the soft drip of water. You follow the sound until it leads you into a smaller room, little more than a hollow in the stone. In the centre, a shallow basin has been carved directly into the floor. A thin trickle of water falls from a crack in the ceiling into its centre, the drops striking with a quiet, constant sound. You kneel beside it, watching the ripples spread out in perfect circles, vanish, and then be born again. This, you think, is how time feels here, not as a line, but as a series of circles repeating endlessly. The room is cool and still, and you linger for a while, letting the sound of the water settle into you. It feels almost like a heartbeat, slow, steady, patient. If you closed your eyes, you could imagine lying down here and letting the city's rhythm lull you to sleep. When you stand and turn to leave, the sound fades quickly, replaced by the hush of the corridor. The tunnel curves upward slightly, and as you climb, you feel the faint pull of fresher air ahead. You emerge into a wider space, the ceiling higher, the light from your lamp reaching farther before being swallowed by shadow. Here, the acoustics change. Your footsteps sound sharper, and the echoes linger just a moment longer. You take a breath and speak a single word, and it comes back to you, softened but intact. You imagine this room filled with voices, a quiet murmur swelling into something warm and communal. Perhaps this was a meeting place, or a spot where people gathered to share stories during the long hours below. You walk slowly along the wall, tracing the edges of niches carved at even intervals. They are empty now, but you imagine them holding lamps, their light pooling onto the floor, casting soft arcs upward. In the flicker of those imagined flames, the room feels alive again. Another passage leads away from this chamber, and you take it without hesitation. The floor slopes downward, the air cooling once more. The walls here are closer, the ceiling lower, pressing the sound of your steps back toward you. You can hear your heartbeat in your ears, steady and unhurried. The corridor opens into a small circular room. The ceiling here is domed, smooth, without a single jagged edge. You stand in the center and feel the way the space shapes the air around you. Even in the quiet, you sense how sound would gather here, how voices might carry perfectly from one side to the other. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to nothing, and yet in that nothing, you hear everything. The memory of water trickling in the basin, the imagined voices in the gathering room, the faint breath of air from unseen shafts. You feel your shoulders loosen again, the weight of the world above fading a little more. Down here, the urgency of time dissolves. When you open your eyes, the tunnel ahead waits, its darkness thick and still. You step into it, feeling the walls close in before opening again into yet another space. This one low and long, with a bench carved along one side. You sit for a moment, your lamp resting on the floor, the light pooling in a small circle around your feet. The shadows sway gently with the flame, as though the walls themselves are breathing. Sitting here, you notice the quiet is not absolute. There's a subtle vibration in it, a kind of low hum that might be the movement of air through the city's unseen veins. It's easy to imagine the builders knowing exactly how to create this, not just for ventilation, but for calm. A constant reminder that the city itself is alive and watching over its inhabitants. You stand and continue onward, the bench fading into shadow behind you. The air grows drier here, and the floor flattens underfoot. You pass through a narrow arch and into a space that feels like a corridor between worlds, the stone to your left rough and untouched, the stone to your right smooth and carefully carved. You walk along the dividing line, one hand on each wall, feeling the contrast. It's as though the city is showing you its two faces, the raw earth it was born from, and the shaped, intentional form it became. The passage curves once more, and with that curve comes a shift in the air, a warmth, faint but noticeable. It's not from sunlight, it's something else, perhaps the closeness of the chambers ahead. You follow it, and the sound of your steps blends with the hush until they're almost the same thing. Somewhere in this darkness, you begin to lose track of how far you've gone, how many turns you've taken, but it doesn't matter. The city feels endless, not in a way that overwhelms, but in a way that comforts. You could keep walking like this forever, the air brushing your skin, the stone holding you steady, the silence speaking in its slow, patient voice. And maybe that's the point, to bring you to a place where forward and backward blur, where the journey itself becomes the destination. The deeper you go, the more you realize you're not just exploring Derinkuyu. You're walking into the kind of stillness that stays with you long after you leave. You step forward, and the tunnel seems to drink the light from your lamp. The walls absorb its glow, the shadows closing in not as threat, but as invitation. The air is cool and dry, unchanging, as though it has been waiting in this state for 1,000 years. You walk slowly, and with each step the present feels thinner, the past pressing in from all sides until the two are no longer separate. It begins subtly, the feeling that your own footsteps are not entirely your own. The sound of them seems layered, your rhythm overlaid with others, softer pads, heavier thuds, the shuffle of bare feet, the scrape of sandals. You glance behind, knowing you are alone, yet feeling the weight of company just outside the reach of your light. The tunnel curves and widens into a long chamber with a high arched ceiling. Here, the stillness is different. It has a depth to it, a kind of fullness, as though every sound ever made here still lingers, stacked in invisible layers. You close your eyes, and the darkness inside them becomes the same as the darkness around you. And then you hear it, not with your ears exactly, but somewhere in your bones. The hum of voices speaking in a language you do not recognize, the faint chime of metal against stone, the laughter of children darting between pillars that no longer stand. You open your eyes, and for an instant, it's as if the chamber has shifted. The walls are lit not by your lamp, but by dozens of oil flames set in niches, their light trembling against the stone. The air smells of smoke and bread, of animals kept close for warmth, of the living breath of hundreds gathered together. Figures move through the chamber, shadow over shadow, their forms half solid in the flicker, yet you cannot see their faces. You take a step forward, and the vision holds. You're walking among them now, moving between clusters of people bent over low tables, children curled against their mothers, a pair of men speaking quietly near the entrance to a side corridor. No one looks at you, yet you feel them pass close enough that the air stirs on your skin. You think of all the centuries between you and them, and yet in this moment, the distance feels no greater than the space between your hand and the wall. The tunnel beyond the chamber slopes gently downward, and you follow it, the scene shifting around you. In one breath, it is empty, the walls bare, the air still, and in the next, it is alive again. You see women carrying baskets of grain toward a low archway, a child leading a small goat along the passage, the flash of a clay jug catching the lamplight. You walk among them, unacknowledged but present, as if you are both visitor and memory. You realize now that this city does not separate its times. The lives lived here are still here, woven into the stone itself. Every step you take is a step they have taken. Every place you pause is a place they once stood, perhaps for the same reason, to feel the air shift, to listen to the silence, to wait. The passage narrows again, and your lamp's light touches the smooth curve of a great rolling stone door, frozen mid-turn as if left open for just a moment. You imagine the sound it would make if moved, a deep grinding roll that would echo through the corridors. In the layered time of this place, you can almost hear it now, the rumble blending with the murmur of voices, the hurried footsteps, the sharp call of someone urging others to hurry. Beyond the door, the tunnel drops steeply. You descend slowly, the air growing cooler, the scent of damp stone stronger. The sound of water reaches you before you see it, a slow, steady flow, different from the soft drips you've heard before. You enter a chamber where a narrow channel runs along one wall, clear water slipping silently past. You crouch and touch it, feeling the cold press into your skin. This water has been moving here for centuries, unbothered by the rise and fall of empires above. As you straighten, the layered sense of time deepens. You see a man filling a jar from the channel, his hands practiced and sure. He moves past you, not seeing you, and vanishes into the dark beyond. Then the space is empty again, only the water moving, only you standing in the quiet. You begin to notice how the city folds these moments together. The smell of fresh bread that comes and goes, the flicker of light in a passage where no lamp burns, the faint sound of footsteps fading down a tunnel you have yet to walk. It is not haunting, it is continuity. The city does not lose its people, it carries them forward. In a smaller chamber off the main path, you find a bench carved into the wall. You sit, letting your lamp rest at your feet. The shadows dance across the stone, and in their movement you see shapes, hands passing objects, a face bending close, the outline of someone resting with their head in their arms. You realize that if you stayed here long enough, the room would fill completely, not with ghosts, but with memory made visible. You rise and move on, your footsteps slow, almost reluctant. You understand now that you're not just a visitor. You're becoming part of the city's pattern, your sounds, your breath, your presence added to the weave. Someone walking here centuries from now might feel the faint echo of you as you feel the faint echo of them. The tunnel ahead bends sharply, and as you step through, the light changes. The walls seem to hold a faint glow of their own, a trick of the mineral flecks in the stone catching your lamp. The air is warmer here, and for a moment you smell something sweet, like dried fruit or honey. The scene shifts again. Baskets lined against the wall, hands moving quickly to pack them, the rustle of cloth and the murmur of voices trading instructions. Then, in a breath, it is gone. You stop and rest your hand on the wall. It is solid, cool, real, and yet you know now that this solidity is only one layer of the truth. Beneath it and within it, the lives of this place still move. Past and present are only different faces of the same stone. You walk on, feeling the city carrying you deeper into its folded time. You no longer measure the distance in steps, but in moments, the moments you pass through, and the ones that pass through you. Here, in the city's deepest heart, the line between then and now has dissolved entirely. The corridor straightens, its walls closing in just enough to guide you forward. Your lamp casts a steady glow, but you can feel the darkness pressing at its edges, patient and unhurried. It has been here for centuries, waiting for light to pass through it, and it will remain long after you're gone. As you walk, you begin to think about how little we truly hold on to, how fragile our record of the past really is. Even here, in a city carved into living stone, time has been at work. Tool marks fade until they are only shadows in the rock. soot stains lighten and vanish. The sharper edges of steps are worn into gentle curves. Each small change is invisible in the moment, but over decades, centuries, they erase the details that once told a clearer story. You pause in a long, low room where the ceiling dips close overhead. There are alcoves along the wall, evenly spaced, their openings worn smooth by countless hands. They're empty now, but you can imagine them filled with jars, tools, or woven baskets. The objects are gone, the materials they were made from long since crumbled to dust. What remains is only the space where they once were, a hollow in the stone, waiting for someone to notice and wonder. The truth is that most of what existed here has been lost forever. We can see the bones of the city, but not its flesh. We can trace the shape of its passages, but not the faces of the people who moved through them. Even the names are gone. We do not know what the original builders called this place, or themselves. The stories they told, the songs they sang, the moments that filled their days, all of it has dissolved into silence. You run your hand along the wall, feeling the cool, unyielding surface. Stone seems eternal, but it too changes. Tiny fractures form over time. Moisture seeps in, carrying minerals that stain and soften. Entire sections can collapse under the right conditions, sealing away whatever they hold. Even the strongest architecture can vanish, leaving only faint impressions beneath the earth. When Derinkuyu was rediscovered in the 20th century, it was as though the earth had lifted a corner of its blanket to reveal a hidden room. But for every place like this that is found, countless others remain buried. Their entrance is lost, their chambers filled in by centuries of soil and rock. Some may be gone completely, erased by earthquakes, floods, or the slow crush of the land above. You step into another corridor, this one narrower, its floor uneven. A shallow groove runs along the base of one wall, carved to carry water away from living spaces. It is still intact, still functional, but you know that with enough time, even this will fade. Sediment will fill it, the groove will soften, and one day it will be just another mark in the stone, unremarkable, its purpose forgotten. In the grand scale of history, human memory is alarmingly short. A few generations are enough for the details to blur, for facts to become stories, and stories to become myth. Without written records, even great cities can disappear entirely from our awareness. We think of the past as fixed, but it is more like a tide, advancing, retreating, reshaping the shoreline with every movement. You enter a larger room, the floor scattered with fragments of rock that have fallen from the ceiling. They are small, harmless, but they remind you that nothing is immune to time. If this city were left untouched for another 1,000 years, parts of it would crumble, sealing away what remains. And if no one came to clear it, to map it, to remember it, Derinkuyu could slip back into the earth entirely, its story reduced to a rumour. The fragility is not just in the stone, it is in us. We decide what to record, what to pass down, what to preserve. Entire histories can vanish if they are deemed unimportant, or if there is no one left to care. The builders of Derinkuyu surely thought their descendants would remember their work, their reasons, their lives. And perhaps they did, for a time. But now we stand here without those answers, holding only the walls and the silence they contain. You kneel to look closely at the floor. Tiny chips of obsidian lie mixed with the dust. Perhaps the remains of tools, perhaps just natural fragments carried in with the volcanic stone. They are small enough to overlook, but each is a survivor, lasting centuries longer than the hands that once held it. You pick one up, turn it in the light, and imagine the life it belonged to. Then you place it back, knowing that its story will remain untold unless someone chooses to tell it. As you move on, the corridor bends, leading you into a smaller, darker chamber. The air here is cooler, and you can smell the faint mineral tang of water somewhere nearby. The room is empty except for a single niche in the far wall, large enough to hold a small statue or sacred object. Whatever was placed here is gone, leaving only the outline of its presence. You imagine someone standing here long ago, looking at that object, perhaps speaking to it in prayer or gratitude. That moment, their breath in the cool air, the way the light caught the carved figure, is gone. It exists now only as a possibility in your mind. That is the fragility of memory. Once the chain of telling is broken, the event is lost, and all that remains is speculation. The passage beyond the chamber is steep, leading you upward for the first time in a while. You can feel the shift in the air as you climb, slightly warmer, faintly fresher. This city has kept itself alive for centuries through these connections to the surface, but even those can be lost. A single collapse could block a shaft, cutting off the breath of the city below. As you reach the top of the slope, you pause. Behind you lies the long history of what we can see, but ahead lies something different, the weight of everything we cannot know. You realize that most of the world's past exists in that space, unseen, unrecorded, unremembered. We walk on the surface of it every day without knowing. You take a deep breath, the coolness of the underground filling your lungs, and step forward into the next corridor. The fragility of the record is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to listen more closely, to notice the details that might otherwise slip away. Here in Derinkuyu, the stone still speaks, but only to those who are willing to hear. The air feels lighter here, as though the stone itself has thinned between you and the surface. The corridor slopes gently, and the silence has shifted. No longer the heavy enclosed stillness of the deeper levels, but a softer, more contemplative quiet. You slow your steps, not because the path demands it, but because something in you wants to linger. You've walked through so much of Derinkuyu now, the vast chambers, the narrow corridors, the hidden alcoves, the ancient wells. You've traced your hand along stone shaped by hands long gone. You've breathed the same air that once carried the sound of voices, the smell of bread, the warmth of life packed close together. And yet, you know you've not seen all of it. No one has, not truly. It strikes you now that the city has been telling you its story in pieces, never all at once. A flicker of sound in one room, a change in the air in another, the ghost of a footprint worn into the floor. It has given you fragments and let you stitch them together in your own way. But the full truth, whatever that is, remains just out of reach, like a word you almost remember but can't quite say. You enter a round chamber where the walls curve perfectly into the ceiling, and for a moment you do nothing but stand still. Your lamp rests in your hand, casting a small warm circle around you. Beyond that circle, the shadows are soft and patient. You think about the people who once stood here, perhaps for the same reason, to simply be in the stillness, to let the walls hold them without asking for anything in return. The thought brings a kind of peace. You've followed the city's path, turned where it turned, descended when it descended, and risen when it rose. You've been pulled into its layers as time, its contradictions, its impossible details, its myths, its silences. And now you feel the story settling into you, not as a solved mystery, but as a presence you can carry. You walk on, and the floor levels out. Your lamp glints against the faint remains of tool marks in the wall, and you think of the countless hours it took to carve each passage. There's a humility in that work, knowing you will never see the city complete, knowing you're shaping something that will outlast you. Perhaps the builders felt the same thing you do now, that the act of making, of moving through, of leaving your mark is itself the meaning. A narrow opening on your left draws your eye. You duck inside and find a small alcove, barely large enough to stand in. The air here is cooler, and the light doesn't reach far. You lean against the wall and close your eyes. Without the distraction of sight, you hear the faintest sound. Air moving somewhere deep in the rock, a slow, even breath. It is as if the city is reminding you that it is alive in its own way, carrying on whether or not. You're here to witness it. You leave the alcove and follow the main passage again. It curves gently, and ahead you see the pale suggestion of a larger space. As you step into it, the ceiling opens high above you, disappearing into darkness. The floor is smooth, the walls free of alcoves or shelves. This space feels unassigned, as though it was left for something yet to happen. You stand in the center and let the emptiness fill you. In that quiet, you realize that perhaps the city's greatest gift is not the answers it holds, but the questions it leaves you with. Why was it begun? Who shaped its deepest levels? How many lives did it shelter? How many more could it? And beyond those questions, the larger ones. What else lies hidden? What other cities wait in the dark, carrying their own stories in silence? You take a breath, slow and deep, and let the air settle in your chest. You feel the steadiness of the stone beneath your feet, the faint movement of air against your skin, the small weight of the lamp in your hand. These are the constants in this place: touch, breath, light, shadow. Everything else shifts, changes, fades. You begin to move again, the sound of your steps joining the memory of all the steps that came before. You think of how, in some distant future, someone might walk here and feel your presence the way you felt others, not as a ghost, but as an echo in the rhythm of the place. You are part of the city now, in some quiet, imperceptible way. The corridor narrows once more, and you feel the faint upward slope beneath your feet. You do not know where it leads, perhaps to another chamber, perhaps toward the surface, perhaps into a passage you have not yet imagined. The uncertainty does not trouble you. The journey here is not about knowing what comes next. It is about being here for each step, each breath, each sound in the stillness. Somewhere behind you, the city continues to hold the weight of centuries. Somewhere ahead, it waits to receive the next. And here, in this moment, you walk between them, a bridge made of flesh and breath moving through stone. You slow your pace, letting the quiet settle in deeper. There is no rush. The city has waited this long. It will wait for whatever comes after you. And as you move forward, you carry its story not as a completed tale, but as an open question, one you will keep long after the tunnels are behind you. It is the kind of question that lingers at the edge of thought, the kind that rises again in quiet moments. What else might be hidden, waiting, breathing in the dark? The tunnel ahead is lit only by the soft, warm glow of your lamp. The stone seems to lean in close, as if listening to your final steps. You move slowly, feeling each breath in your chest, each shift of your weight against the floor. The air is calm here, steady, gentle, as though the city itself knows you're near the end of your walk. It has been a long journey. You've descended through narrow throats of stone, wandered vast halls where the air still carries the memory of voices, stood in chambers carved to hold both life and silence. You've walked in the present while glimpsing the past, stood in one moment while touching another, and now you feel the city's story gathering itself like the slow drawing in of breath. The corridor opens into one last chamber. It is neither the grandest nor the smallest you've seen, but something about it feels like a resting place. The floor is smooth beneath your feet, the walls curve in a way that draws your eyes upward, and somewhere in the ceiling a shaft carries a thin, pale breath of air down to you. It smells faintly of the surface, of distance, of sky. You stand in the center, listening. At first, you hear only the quiet. Then slowly, you begin to notice more. The faint rustle of the air moving above, the soft hum of your own heartbeat in your ears, the imagined echoes of lives that passed through here long before you. They are not loud, not demanding. They are simply present, woven into the stone in ways that cannot be erased. You think of the city now as more than a place. It is a keeper of time, of memory, of silence. It has sheltered thousands, perhaps tens of thousands over the centuries, and now it shelters you, if only for these moments. Its walls have seen fear and safety, darkness and light, endings and beginnings, and like the earth itself, it holds them all without judgment. You close your eyes and breathe in the cool air. In your mind, you trace the path you've taken, the deep descent through ancient doors, the endless turning of corridors, the touch of your hand against the stone, the stillness in the rooms where the past seemed to breathe. Each step has been part of the same story, and yet each step has also been its own small world. Somewhere far above, the world is moving. Wind in the trees, clouds drifting across the sun, footsteps on streets. But here, time feels slower, as if each second is being laid gently into place. You could stay here, and the city would hold you, just as it has held countless others. When you open your eyes, you look at the walls one last time, knowing you will remember them, not for their shapes, but for the feeling they gave you, that the world is larger and older than we can ever fully know, and that its hidden places hold truths we're not always ready to hear. You turn toward the exit passage. The upward slope feels different underfoot, a steady pull toward the surface. The air grows fresher as you climb, the darkness slowly giving way to a softer grey. You take your time, not wanting to rush the last moments in the city's care. At the final bend, you stop. Behind you lies the weight of centuries. Ahead, the open air. You take one last deep breath of the underground, letting its cool stillness fill you. You carry it with you as you step into the light. The surface greets you with a brightness that feels sharper after so long below. You blink, adjusting, but you keep the underground close in your thoughts. The wind brushes against your face, carrying with it the hum of life above. So different from the life below, yet bound to it in ways we cannot always see. You walk a little farther, then pause to look back. The entrance is unremarkable, just as it must have been for centuries, a doorway like any other. It hides the vastness beneath, protecting it from the careless glance. And perhaps that is how it should be. Some mysteries need their shadows. Derinkuyu has shown you only what it chose to show. Its deeper truths remain in the dark, waiting for another day, another seeker, another question. And maybe that is the lesson. Not to demand all the answers at once, but to listen, to walk slowly, and to leave space for wonder. As you leave, the city stays behind, quiet, patient, enduring. But a part of it now walks with you, in the way you notice the shape of shadows, the sound of silence, the hidden depth beneath the surface of things. And so, as the wind settles and the light shifts across the land, you carry a question with you, the same one that has lingered since your first step underground. What else might lie hidden, waiting for us to remember? If you've been walking through this journey with me tonight, I hope the story has wrapped you in stillness and wonder. Tell me, where are you listening from? I'd love to know which part of the world you call home while we travel together through time and shadow. If this journey into Derinkuyu has stirred your curiosity, let it wander further. Share this story so others can walk these tunnels in their minds. Leave a comment with your thoughts or your own stories of hidden places. And if you'd like to join me again for more nights in the company of the past, make sure to subscribe, so that when the next door in the stone opens, you'll be here to step through it. And as always, may the silence guide you through the past.